Hello, and welcome to the More Than Muscle podcast, presented to you by your coach and overall favorite person, me, Trainer Greg McBride. I'm super excited that you are tuned in today, and you can stay tuned in by subscribing to this podcast. In the More Than Muscle podcast, we will cover the skills, habits, and practices needed to be successful. Going beyond just the physical, we will talk about how to be the best version of yourself, all while looking through the lens of health and fitness. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Hello, welcome back everyone. This is episode 19. Today we're going to talk about keys to muscle growth. I am a hypertrophy guy. I'm a bodybuilder, so muscle hypertrophy and muscle growth are the most important things. Being able to know how to train your muscles, how to get your body working, what exercises to select, and all of these different things, these different factors that come into play when you're trying to grow your muscles is the game. If you don't understand anatomy, you don't understand how to adapt and use different modes to create this hypertrophy, you are going to be stuck in the gym, wheels spinning, and not able to grow at an effective rate. So today we're going to talk about a few of these different keys, some of the ones that I think are the most important, and how you can apply them to your training to get the most out of your training to grow into that monster that some of you out there are looking to do, or even just build any muscle at all. So there are 3 keys that we're going to cover today, and that's going to be quality of movement, intentionality, and intensity. So as we dive into this, what are these 3 components? What is quality of movement? Now, there's a quality over quantity. People talk about that quite often. It's a common phrase, but how do you have quality of movement when it comes to hypertrophy? What does that look like? How does that come into actual practice? So we're going to break that down into a few components. So quality of movement in a hypertrophy setting starts with your setup. How are you positioned? How are you getting prepared to do a particular movement or a particular exercise? So I am going to stick to a bicep curl for most of this. And I'm working on a video right now about alignment and all that stuff, getting even more detail about how to grow your bicep. But let's talk about this setup. So let's say a bicep curl, you know that you're bringing your forearm to your upper arm, your humerus. Just that flexion right there in your elbow is what the bicep does. So how can you set yourself up to do that the best? Well, you need to have alignment. You want to have those 2 endpoints, those muscles come together. So how do you do that? You can, standing vertically in an anatomical position, you are already in a great position with the strength curve to be able to curl that dumbbell or whatever you have, that resistance to create that contraction in your bicep. But what's important about the setup is not just knowing the moving parts, but the parts that shouldn't be moving. So that is where it gets a little more interesting. So there's a lot of things that you can do to keep the non-moving parts still while you're working on focusing your energy and your concentration on the actual muscle that you're trying to engage. For instance, the biceps brachii has 2 heads, and they attach both in different spots on the scapular coracoid process, and kind of in the another spot in the glenoid in the scapula. Gosh, mine was going blank there for a second. But in those 2 spots, they're both attached to the scapula though. So think about that. Your shoulder blade, your scapula, which kind of glides across your rib cage, up, down, and out, rotation, all that is connected to your bicep. So if you get a lot of movement in your shoulders from that shoulder blade, your scapula gliding back and forth, do you think that's going to affect your quality of your movement in your bicep? Of course it is. So it's important to get something like that, your scapula, locked in place so it's not going to adversely affect the quality of that movement. So a lot of times when you see people trying to cheat, they'll get the swinging, and that's kind of where the movement kind of initiates. And that shoulder blade, they'll rock forward, and they'll use their torso, but they'll also kind of jam that scapula, let it slide back and forth. So if you're going to get set up for a bicep curl, you want to make sure those shoulder blades are locked into place. You don't want movement there. And then alignment. You want to have the force being perpendicular to gravity, or parallel. So you got that force running up and down. You want that arm to be parallel to the force of gravity. That's where you want to start, because that's where you have the least mechanical advantage. You want to work with that strength curve. So at that zero, you don't want to have any work being done. But as you get to the harder part, which is as you're contracting almost to that 90 degree where you're holding the most weight, that's perpendicular to the force of gravity. That's when you're going to get the most work. So all this setup, alignment, and form, understanding that, again, you're trying to bring these 2 points closer together. That is how you get that optimal contraction, optimal setup, optimal alignment, but then focusing on form. You don't want your arm going all different directions, curling outside of your body, inside the body, twisting, rotating. You want everything locked in place, and just that singular hinge movement happening, that single flexion right there at the elbow. Now it's different from different movements and different joints. Some movements require multiple joints moving, and the timing of that gets factored in. But for this instance, when you're thinking about the bicep, it's just a single joint that we're focusing on primarily, and that's the elbow. Yes, there is some flexion in the shoulder, but right now we're focusing on that elbow. So next, intentionality. Now this is my favorite part to coach, my favorite part to take people through, and that's the understanding that you need to be intentional about every part of your training if you are going to be serious and you really want to see change and see results. That intentionality starts with the movements that you select, the exercises that you select. There are tons of different ways to train a bicep, all these different curls, spider curls, line incline, hammer curls, supinated curls, reverse curls. All these have a purpose, but you need to understand why you choose a specific exercise, especially if you're trying to develop a lagging body part, or you're really going to the aesthetics of things. And if you're doing bicep curls, you're probably more than likely working on aesthetics. But also the emphasis of that muscle. There, like I said, those movements emphasize different parts of the muscle. You could be working the long head or the short head of the biceps. You might not even be focusing primarily on the biceps brachii. You might be working the coracobrachialis or the brachioradialis. All these different elbow flexors that work to in that range of motion, in that arm, developing those muscles. If you don't understand the movements that develop those, how can you be sure that you're really working those muscles? So the anatomy, along with the intentionality from exercise selection, they kind of go hand in hand. You need to understand both and be able to apply them. Now next, mind-muscle connection. There's been research shown how important this is. Load is never going to go away. The importance of load, which we're going to come back to later in the next section when we talk about intensity, but the importance of focusing your mind, your concentration on the movements that you're doing, the muscle that you're trying to engage, helps. You can have a stronger contraction, recruit more motor neurons, more muscles, more muscle fibers when you seriously take your time and focus. Say, okay, biceps. This is where it's at. This is what I'm doing. Try and feel that muscle. I tell people, literally take your mind, take your eyes, and dig inside that muscle. Like you're actually living in there. Take all that mental capacity, put it inside of that muscle, and focus on it. Contract. Feel it shorten. Feel everything happening inside that muscle. Squeeze it, and then ease it. Feel it let go. Slowly let gravity overcome those muscles. And that's the important part in hypertrophy. If you can't have connection with your muscles, you can't train a specific muscle. You can move weight, you can get stronger, but when you're trying to sculpt and design a body the way you want to, if you can't have that mind muscle connection and connect with those fibers on a smaller level, you're going to struggle. You're going to really struggle. You can do other things to help you. Again, that alignment and that setup can help you prioritize a particular group of muscles, But if you can't really focus and connect with it, you're going to still not get the most out of your training. And that's all I want to talk about, is how to get the most out of your training. So the end all of everything, one thing you can't do well without is intensity. A lot of times I see people get so caught up on the science of things, the reps, the sets, and the things that they've heard and seen all on social media, things that they've Googled, but then they forget you can't do it without hard work, intensity, load, the right rep range. Some terms that I use in different techniques are things like reps in reserve. Your job in hypertrophy is to bring your muscle to near failure or to failure. Now, we haven't ever been able to really get to failure, but you want to get as close to that as you can. That is what allows you to grow, because you're giving your body a new stimulus. Now, that stimulus doesn't always have to be from weight. It could be things like form, technique. That's why those things come into play. If you can get a better contraction by focusing on your muscle, then that is a new stimulus. You don't have to throw a bunch of weight to get that stimulus. But it's that progressively overloading and giving your body that new stimulus that allows you to grow. That's what hypertrophy is about. So again, you can't do it if you're just going to grab 5 pounds and do that all the time. There's going to be a need for more load, because you'll probably get bored, or just pain that will stop you before your muscles are really the point where they've reached that near failure, that fatigue, technically fatiguing that muscle fiber, which is the goal. Some different techniques that I implement for my clients and myself are things like drop sets, supersets, playing with tempo, and yes, literally going to near failure. So there'll be sets where they'll work, you'll get 12 reps. As soon as you're done, you drop the weight, bring it down, 8 reps, drop the weight, maybe hitting one last set really like 15 reps, or going till failure. Or I might tell them to leave reps in reserve, so 1 or 2 reps. So right before you feel like you're gonna fail, you feel like you can get 1 or 2 more reps, stop there. Now, there are many people who don't need a lot of that, a lot of near failure work, but that correct load, that correct volume management is going to help. Now, when you get to be more advanced, those type of techniques come into play. But first, you just want to make sure you have good alignment, good setup, and then focus on the muscle. That in itself is going to take a lot of people to a next level. So you can get that, and you can start to build. And these are the fundamental keys to allow yourself to grow, hypertrophy, build muscle, and even strength works in the same idea. If you can't get yourself set in a way that's going to help your body, if you can't stay in alignment, if your form isn't there, if you can't connect with your body, know the muscles that you're trying to engage, you are working at half capacity. So to wrap it up, 3 big keys to be able to get your muscles to grow, hypertrophy, even strength. Quality of movement. Move well before you move often. Don't go in there and start throwing in a lot of weight, throwing a lot of volume if you can't move well. Learn how to move well. Understand anatomy. We all have bodies. Why not take the time to understand how your body works? Second, intentionality. Learn the setup, learn the alignment, learn the reasons and purposes for different variations of movement. Why they do this, why this engages a muscle this way or that way. Ask a coach. That's what I do. I teach all my clients. I'm going to make sure they're aware of what their body is doing, because it's their body. And then intensity. There is no substitute for hard work. There's no substitute for grinding and training hard, lifting heavy, and taxing and challenging your body. If you really want to see change, you really want to see growth, you have to be uncomfortable. You can't just sit there, relax, and think, hey, I moved. Yes, that's better than nothing. But to progress, to see improvement, that is a necessary step. So, the keys to muscle growth, guys: quality of movement, intentionality, intensity. Thank you. That's what I have for you today. Until next time, be more than muscle, y'all. This has been another episode of the More Than Muscle podcast. Thank you again for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I also hope that you found something that you can take away and apply immediately to your life. I am your host, Trainer Greg McBride, and until next time, train with purpose and be more than muscle.